I would love to introduce to you Alex. Alex with air quotes. Alex will explain how that came about. And today they're talking about testing whether your security actually works with red teaming. So I'll pass it over now.
Thank you. Hey, hi. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, thank you. So my name is Alex, as you may have just heard, with double quotes. I hear some of you wondering why the double quotes. It's very simple. When I wrote one of my first blog posts, a bunch of journalists referred to me as a hacker who goes by the name Alex in double quotes, which is also my real name. So I knew that it was at that moment that I had to make my hacker name also be, Alex in double quotes. I once also in 2020 found former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott's passport number and phone number online, and when I did all this, and I told him about it, and I didn't get arrested, and when I did all this, some journalists had the audacity to call me a hacker in double quotes, whatever that is. I also help organize a conference just like this one called PurpleCon, and it's a conference that instead of looking like this, I don't know if you've ever been to a conference that looks like this, maybe you have, it looks like this. And one fun fact about it is it's actually happening in like a month in Sydney. I don't know. I guess you could come to it if you want. Whatever. I don't care. But enough about me. Professionally, I've worked doing red team at many tech companies, such as Atlassian. And now I'm doing something completely different. Now I have a completely different gig where I am unemployed, which is really good. This is what it looks like if you haven't done it. But enough about my job. Let's talk about your job. You know how at work, like this and this, or some sort of thing that's like an antivirus thing? Why do you have those things? It's to detect if something bad happens, yeah? And you know how at work you also have, is this microphone like cutting out? I hope it's okay. You know how at work you also have like this? You have like Splunk or all of your logs going into something, and then you make like automatic alerts on those logs to try and detect hackers and stuff. Why do you have those things? Or it's to detect if something bad, yeah, okay. But how do you know if that thing works? Like, how do you know if it actually works? It's kind of like a smoke alarm, if you've ever seen one, looks like this. And the point of the smoke alarm is it's meant to be, when fire goes in, it like beeps and you know that there's fire. It's meant to detect something. But if you're just looking at a smoke alarm, there's probably one in this room somewhere, how do you know that it will beep when fire goes into it? Like, you could go up to it and press the button to test it, but that just tests whether you press the button, right? And so, like, for all you know, the smoke alarm, when fire happens, it'll just be like, yep, that's cool, no worries. Like, how do you actually know whether it works? And like, there isn't a way to know whether a smoke alarm works except for trying to make poppadoms by yourself for the first time. And it's also not just your like security software or whatever that you can test, it's also your plans. So like, for example, what if your plan is, if we get hacked, then we'll call this team or whatever, whoever they are. That's a very reasonable plan that people have. But if you actually got hacked, would that actually happen? What if the person who made that plan was on leave? Or what if their phone number changes? Or what if everyone just forgets to do the plan? Like, do you know that's actually what would happen? To speak in formal language, do you know that your policy or procedure would actually get followed? I mean, maybe you do, but do you? Basically what I'm saying in a much more roundabout way is sometimes you think your security looks like this, and you're like, hell yeah, what a good gate that I have. I love that. But then you look at how it gets used in context, and it's actually like this. And if you haven't seen this picture before, I love this picture. It like warms my heart. Also, similarly, you might be thinking like, maybe your security plan is like, we'll put one of these like combination locks on every door, and like we'll give them all code, and we'll only tell the code to people who need it, and then you can only open the door if you know the code. And like that sounds pretty good. Like that sounds pretty secure to me. But like then when you actually try it for real and see how it's used in context, you get like this, and like I don't know the combination to this lock, right? Like I don't know what it is. I haven't done this, but in a way I do know. In a way we all know, you know. And that's why it's important to look at it in context. And so how do you fix this problem? I mean, I'm kind of giving it away, but like you could just test it. So introducing the idea of testing whether your security works. My take is that it's good to do this. And one way that people do this is through this thing called red teaming. And all of these cool people at these cool big kid places do it, so maybe you should also do it. Okay, so let's talk about what do I actually mean by red teaming. There's a lot to unpack here. Firstly, I'm so sorry that it's called this. Red team is like originally a code name from the military. Code names traditionally are what you use when you don't want people to know what you're talking about, not when you do want people to know what you're talking about. So, whoops, we've done that. But I think they called it red because red team was meant to be the attack team, or maybe it was meant to be the Soviets. I hope it wasn't. I hope it was like red was attack. And then blue team was the defense team, and that's how they did it in their like training exercises. Like all these people would be on the same army or whatever. They'd all be on the same side, but someone would play the role of attack, someone would play the role of defense. And I know what some of you are thinking. You're like, maybe if you do both of them, or if they work together, you could call it like the purple team or something. Or maybe purple team is when you've worked on both teams, I don't know. And then maybe like the people who are overseeing it, or the software developers, could be like the green team, and we could have more colors for it. But no, you cannot do this, you cannot live like this. Otherwise people will do this kind of thing. This is not a joke, this is real. This is like people go up on stage and they start talking in front of this, and like, lock in, please. Like, I can't believe you live like... Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm fine. I just think maybe as an industry we can move on from the InfoSec color wheel. Thank you for your time. So, no, like, I kind of skipped over it before, but what actually is red teaming? Like I said, red team's the attack team. And I don't know, let's look it up, let's Google it. And if you look it up, you get this website, which is like, oh, okay, red team tools, which is for covert entry agents. So, and they seem to have a lot of lockpicks and stuff. So maybe red teaming is covert entry. So it's quiz time. What is red teaming? Is it doing physical offensive security? Is it anything offensive security is red team? Or is it doing adversary emulation, where you like pretend to be a particular threat actor? I think if I ask someone which one of these, like everyone in this room would be like, yeah, I know what red teaming is, but do you all agree with each other? Like, the correct answer to this question is yes, it is those things. But which definition are we all using? The definition I'm using today is the third one, the adversary emulation one. So my example of what red teaming is if you work on a red team, you hack whatever it is at the place you're red teaming that a real attacker would. You like research what real attackers do, and you do what they would do, and then you share how you did it with whoever it is that you're hacking, because real hackers don't tell you what you missed. And then what real hackers do is they sell the data on the dark web for big money. So you have to do it too. No, not really. Don't do that. Like, you can stop there. You don't have to be that real. And why do we do red teaming? What are we trying to avoid? I think lots of people do it for different reasons, but for the purposes of this talk, the thing I'm saying we're all trying to avoid is like this. Like, you get hacked, and then you're in the news for being hacked, and everyone who uses your thing is like, oh no, or my data's been hacked, or whatever it is. So for the purposes of this, the thing we're trying to avoid is not a compliance thing or whatever. The thing we're trying to avoid is actually getting hacked and actually getting in the news for it. Or even not getting in the news for it. The thing we're trying to avoid is getting hacked. And so a lot of places, organizations, have this sort of implicit hypothesis, to sound like a scientist, which is that it's okay, our security is fine, that's not going to happen to us. The hypothesis is everything's okay. And so some people, you can talk about red teaming instead as hypothesis testing, right? Because then your experiment is, well, let's try and disprove the hypothesis, and if it works, we'll know it's not true, and if it doesn't, we'll know it is. Or it's evidence for it, at least. And so you could just try and hack yourself. You could, whatever it is that you're afraid of, you could try and do that to yourself and then see if it works or not. And like, I know it sounds scary, but like, I don't know, think about it. If it works, then at least now you know. Like, it's better than being like, yeah, everything's fine, my security's great. Like, at least you know that it's not. And nobody got hurt for real, because you're not actually getting hacked, you're just doing it for yourself. And it's also not someone's like subjective opinion. It's not just like, well, this guy seems pretty confident that our security is bad, so maybe it is, but like, it's actually evidence. And also, you can fix it now because you know about it. And if you try and hack yourself and it doesn't work, then you're like, okay, good, that's some evidence that our security actually works. We love that. So maybe we should do this now. Like, what should we hack? We can now we're meant to hack the place that we work. So what should we hack? I know we could do anything. Should we like break into the office, or should we hack the CEO's email because that would be funny? It might be funny. Or maybe we should just put malware on every computer and believe. And maybe you should do those things, but probably you should do whatever it is the real attackers are doing, whatever it is you're actually worried about. And statistically speaking, that's probably ransomware for most of you, unless you work at the government, in which case, I don't know, no comment. I don't know what's going on at the government. And what I mean by real attackers, there are many different kinds, and threat intelligence is actually a really hard part of this. But broadly speaking, some categories are sort of in increasing order of hacking resources. There's like hacktivists, by which I mean like teenagers on Discord, and like that's a real like threat group that you have to worry about. Some people, yeah, it looks like this. If you've ever been to a hacktivism Discord, it looks like that. No comment where I got this. Also, cyber criminals, like organized crime. Yeah. Isn't this such a good picture? Like, please, everyone steal this picture and use it in whatever recreational use you want. And what those people typically want is they want you to pay the 5 million Bitcoin ransom to the Telegram address that they send you, which is usually ransomware, either the kind that encrypts all your stuff or like the extortion kind. I'm massively generalizing. There's like a whole industry of different things here, but these are some of the most common things. And then there's also APTs, or nation states, and what they want is intelligence. So we have to think about who would attack you, who would attack your organization or whatever thing you're red teaming, who's most likely to do that. And like, that's actually really, really hard, and you probably don't know for sure. But there's a lot of public threat intelligence. There's a lot of like, there's also whole threat intelligence companies. You might have a threat intelligence team at your company or at your organization. So I mean, I'm not talking about it, but this is the part you have to do first before you red team up. You have to figure out what threat do you think is most statistically likely, and then are you prepared for it? And if you're not, do that thing to yourself. That's what is red teaming. How do you actually do red teaming?
Here's a way that you could do red teaming, allegedly. You could have two laptops. You could have your regular work laptop. For the purposes of this, I'm talking about being on an internal red team. Your regular work laptop, which has access to all of your work stuff. You probably already have this laptop. This is the easy part. And then you can also get a second unmarked, untraceable blank laptop that is not enrolled in whatever corporate thing you have. It's just like you walk into the Apple store and you buy one, like that kind of laptop. And you can do all your crimes on that one. And that's a good idea because then it's completely separate. So on the second laptop, you don't use your work email. You don't use a completely different account, different email addresses, different names. Like nothing can overlap between them because, well, a real hacker can't use all your work stuff. So if you're going to pretend to be one, you can't use all the work stuff you already have. You also have to use a completely different network. You can't use the same Wi-Fi. You have to use some dodgy VPN to seem like you're coming from somewhere different. Nothing can be the same as your work thing, and like all different cloud infrastructure as well. Hopefully you can swindle your work to pay for the infrastructure somehow, but like it has to be completely separate because, well, that's what a real attacker would do. And ideally, you make these things look exactly like what the real attackers are doing according to the threat intelligence you have, if you have that. And so instead of calling them experiments, you call them operations. And I don't know, maybe you could name something cool like Operation like Actual Crimes. That would be fun, wouldn't it? And maybe if you work somewhere that did this, you could make cool, fun logos for every time you do a red team operation that could look like this. And like, I mean, allegedly. And I imagine if you're looking at those logos, you're thinking, wow, there must be a lot of like stories behind those. They all look kind of detailed. And like each one of them seems like there's a lot going on there. Like what actually happened in those operations? And I cannot tell you that for legal reasons. But what I guess we could do, like if you want to, is we could talk about like a hypothetical operation that happened. It didn't happen, but it's like hypothetical. Like, I don't know, you could name it anything. It doesn't really matter what you name it, I suppose. And like, for the purposes of this operation, like everything I'm about to say is not real and did not happen. It's stuff that I am like making up. Maybe some of it is real, maybe some of it is not. I'm not saying what. But, you know, it's not like totally made up. So for the purposes of this, let's say that I work on a red team or you work on a red team, whatever, at a hypothetical company that's not real, and it's called like Blatlassian or something. I don't know. I don't care. And like, let's say they make like a product, and that product is called like Blonfluence or something, which like, I guess it kind of looks like the Atlassian product Confluence, but that's crazy how that happens. Huh. So the first part of your red team operation is you have to like, what scenario are you testing? What bad thing that you don't want to happen are you trying to test if it can happen? And so there's a lot of parts to this, but like here's one that I made up. It's also not that good because it's made up. Whoops. For the purposes of this, which attacker are you? Is you're just some cybercrime group. So they're like kind of good at computers, but they're not like government level good at computers. And the goal of this particular attacker, this particular time, is they've decided to target your company, and they want to steal the production Blonfluence database. And they want to do that because they want to look for passwords in that text, and they were going to use those passwords for whatever else, for getting into other companies. I don't know. And this part is like kind of the hard part, is deciding who is your attacker and what do they want, and is that actually a real thing that you're worried about, or is that like theory crafting that you're doing? But for the purposes of this hypothetical operation, this is real. I don't think this is like that common for like a real attacker to do, which is great because this is hypothetical. Anyway, so for the purpose, when you actually start doing your crimes, the first thing you want to do is close that work laptop. You don't need it where we're going. It's all about this laptop now. This is where we live. So I think what you would do on a red team is the same as what a real attacker would do, really, is you have to do a lot of recon, figure out like, what is this company, or what is the thing that I'm targeting? Like, who works there? What do they do? What are their roles? Who has access to the production database? What does this company do? They have all the stuff that you would have heard of for like, it's kind of similar to pen testing recon, honestly. And I hear many of you thinking, wait, but don't you already know that stuff if you work there? Because you know that you work there, for example, right? And like, yeah, well, I mean, first of all, no, you don't know everything about it, but there's a whole bunch of stuff you don't know. But yeah, there is some stuff you do know. But a real attacker doesn't know that stuff, so you can't just use that information because that's not realistic. A real attacker couldn't do that. If you do want to use some information that you know, you have to find some way. You have to show that, oh, well, a real attacker could learn this information by going to this publicly available thing or whatever. And then you actually have to do that thing, so there's a trace of you doing, there's like a trail of you actually doing that as the attacker. But if you can do all that, then yes, you can use the information that you have. But otherwise, it ruins the experiment, right? Because a real attacker can't do it. Anyway, next step is to come up with a plan for how you're going to do it. And like typically, there's a couple of different plans, but a lot of the time it ends up looking like this. You have your crime laptop, and you're going to remote control some target employee's laptop with like malware. And then somehow that employee's laptop going to get you access to the production database. Maybe directly, or maybe that laptop's going to have access to something else, and you're going to get into that thing, and then that thing will eventually have access to the production database somehow. But you don't know in advance, unless your recon is really good, but you probably don't know in advance. You're just kind of going to get on this laptop and believe and hope something happens. So how about getting onto that laptop? There are there are many ways, but there's like one main way. I think you know what it is. The main way is that you decide to recreationally email somebody. For example, you could send them this email. You could be like, hey, what's up? It's me, Slack. And, oh, we're so excited to give you the beta version of Slack. Would you like the beta version of Slack? Yeah, you would. And I bet some of you are thinking that when you click this link, it like downloads something. But one way you could do it is, instead of doing that, like it's just this page that says sign up for the beta version. And when you click it, it really does sign them up for the beta version. It just records the email address of whoever clicks it, and like, that's it. There's no malware. But then later, just the people who clicked on this link, you send them this email. And then they're like, hey, remember before when you signed up for that beta program? And they're like, yeah, I remember. Now it's time for you to actually download it. And that's good because it like kind of filters out people who are suspicious of your email, and it only gets the people who like are expecting it. Like, you know, they often say, don't click on unexpected emails. This is expected now because you signed up for the beta version. Anyway, when you click this button, then well, you do get an app. You get Slack.app, and it, you know, that Slack.app that you get when you download it, it installs Slack.app, which is what you asked for. But it also you could also make it install malware, couldn't you? And so that's a good way you could get your malware installed. And you might be wondering which malware. There are lots of different types of malware. It doesn't really matter, but for the purposes of this, maybe this like cybercrime group isn't that sophisticated. They're not writing their own custom malware. They're just like doing some random off-the-shelf thing because it's easy and cheap and fast, and they're there to make money. So maybe they just use whatever's on GitHub. Maybe they use the same thing people have been using in the CTF today, and so they use some public open source thing, and they just use that. For the purposes of this op, you're like, that might make sense depending on what your threat intel is. But when you're using malware, you've got to make sure not to get caught by the antivirus, right, or AV or whatever it is. And so I wanted to share a tip that I've learned mostly I've been targeting macOS, and I wanted to share a tip that I've learned for how to like dodge like whatever antivirus thing is going on in macOS. And that tip is, don't worry about it. It probably doesn't detect much at all, hypothetically. Anyway, now that you've done that, you've got your remote control of this person's laptop, this target's laptop. But this diagram is kind of misleading. It doesn't look exactly like this. Your laptop doesn't directly connect to theirs. It's usually done by like a C2 server, a malware server that you then SSH into, and then that server controls the target laptop. And when you're doing that, it's really important to make sure you have some sort of not traceable back to you IP address or domain name or certificates and everything on that server, because that's the server that's going to get investigated a lot by the blue team or whoever it is, because that's the server that the compromised laptop is going to be talking to. And so you would not want to accidentally put something that attributes you as the red team there. You would want that to be unmarked, untraceable, could be anybody. Anyway, now that you're actually on this laptop, like once you actually get on the laptop, what do you do? What's the first thing you do? I mean, there's lots of things you can do, but typically what people do is they're like, well, what's in these files? What's in the bash RC? What's in bash history? Are there credentials? Is there like AWS keys here? Are there SSH keys? And like sometimes there are, sometimes there aren't. But if you look around there, sometimes you're like, hey, look, we got an SSH key, or we got an AWS key, which is like even better because you can use it. Like you know where to use that. You can use it on AWS. If it's an SSH key, it's like, well, where do I use it? Maybe you can get there, maybe you can't. That's one thing you might want to do. Another thing you might want to do is steal the Chrome or whatever browser it is cookies. And stealing cookies is like really popular and really good for attackers because like when you steal the cookies, you're just already logged in to whatever thing they're logged into. Like yeah, you have to wait. Yeah, they have to already be logged into it. Fair, but you're already there. That you don't like bypass. You don't know the password. It like bypasses the two-factor auth and all that stuff. And two-factor auth is hard to pass. So it's great when cookies just do that for free. I think that's why attackers are so into them. One way you could do that, there are many ways to steal Chrome cookies, but I guess you could still use a technique that someone published in 2019 that still works to this day, hypothetically. Anyway, once you've done that, another thing you might want to do is proxy through the laptop, because sometimes there's secret important stuff that you want to hack into that's only on the internal network or internal VPN or whatever. So you probably want to get your laptop to like SOX proxy through their laptop, so then you can access the internet or the internal network via their laptop. And that's like a really common thing people want to do, but it's also really hard and really fiddly and really annoying because like maybe it's not a direct connection like that. Maybe you're actually connecting to that laptop via your C2 server, which is via some other redirector, which is via somewhere else. So you're doing like 5 network hops to get there. And it's pretty slow when you proxy over that many network hops. And also, what if this laptop just goes to sleep? Then it's all over. Like you don't have any shell, you don't have anything, and your whole proxy goes down, so you have to like figure out this person's working hours and make sure you're only there when the laptop's awake. It's like hard, right? Anyway, after you've done those things, what would happen next? Typically what happens is being confused, being like, what is all this stuff that I'm finding? What does all this mean? Because you're kind of getting information overload because you're downloading all this data about this company you don't know anything about. And like, for example, maybe you're like looking through some file somewhere and you're like, yes, I'm hacking. I found an API key. This is good because API keys let you log into stuff. But then the more you look at it, you're like, well, wait, what's Blogmon? What does that do? Is that good? Is that what I want? Does that have the data that I'm looking for? Or is that just some random metrics thing that doesn't do anything? And like, you don't know, you have to find out. And also, even if you did know, where do you put the API key? Like, where's the actual API? Like, I know that's not like a secret, but like, I know it's not a secret, but you do need to know where it goes. And maybe you don't know, and you have to find that out as well. And then when you look at it more, you're like, well, is this a production API key, or is this like some random developer that not actually have the data that I want? And does it not actually have the data that I want? And even then, when you're using it, you're like, well, wait, is this expired, or does it actually still work? And you don't know the answers to any of these things when you just find it. And I'm not saying it's impossible, but these are all things you have to worry about before you actually use it. Typically what happens then is you make a plan again, given all that information of whatever you discovered on this laptop or whatever you've discovered in Recon, and you put it all together and be like, what do I do? And I don't know, there's lots of things you could do, but a common one is you say, let's try stealing the Chrome cookies, and let's say for the sake of this, there were some AWS cookies in there. So you're like, cool, let's steal those and let's log into the AWS console. Maybe there's something good in there. Maybe the database is there. So you wait for the person to actually log into the AWS console, maybe they already are, and then you steal the cookies and you put the cookies into your browser, and then you go to the AWS website and you're like, nice, I did it. I'm logged in to someone else's AWS account. I'm hacking. We're doing it. But then like maybe you look around a bit closer and you're like, oh wait, is this some random empty, boring developer account? That would be kind of a shame to have done all that effort and to just be logged into some random test account. That's kind of sad, hypothetically, of course. And then like when you were logging into that account, even the boring developer one, you have to ask yourself, did you remember to use the SOX proxy, or did you just log into that account from like whatever VPN address your like crime laptop is on, which is some like extremely shady like data center IP address that a real person logging into the AWS console would never ever do, and is like, and have you triggered some AWS GuardDuty Alert, and is the entire incident response team like coming to knock down your door and like break into your house because of that one mistake you've made? Hypothetically, that could happen. Anyway, and then somehow you do some more steps and do some stuff, and you steal the production database, and you're like, yeah, we did it. Well, that wasn't so bad, but it's not over yet. It's not over just because of that. Like, just because you get the objective, that doesn't mean it's over. Because what about the actual incident? Like, if you just get in and steal the database and get out, that no one knows that a red team has occurred, you're just kind of doing crime. Like, you have to tell them about it at some point. So your goal, so then you have to, I mean, you could just tell them about it. Another thing you could do is try and get caught realistically. Like, assuming you didn't get caught up to this spot, you could try and do something that's plausible that attacker would do, and hope that you get caught out of that, and keep doing that louder and louder until you do get caught. And that's good because then you get to let the people practice incident response. And like, it's really, I mean, maybe they get enough practice already, but it's nice to practice incident response where there's someone who afterwards can show you everything that you missed, everything that you got, give you both sides of the story, which you don't really get normally. When that kind of thing happens, you really don't want to let the incident response people call the FBI, because like they call up and be like, yeah, we're being hacked. And then they call up again being like, oh, actually it was us hacking us, don't worry about it. And like, that's really embarrassing if that happens hypothetically, of course. After all of that, you then write a very, very detailed confession letter, which is explaining exactly what you did, why you did it, not really why you did it, just exactly what you did. And in like, I think it's good to write it in like I think it's good to write two. You can write like one technical debrief for the technical people, and you can also write like a more generally accessible one and share it with everybody. Because it's actually really good when everybody at the organization or whatever can read the write-up, because when firstly, they go, what is this, hacking? Whoa, there's hacking going on at my organization. But then when they actually read it, they learn the most incredible things. Like they learn, oh, we have a security team. That's amazing. And like, I don't know, it's hard to get that culture change, right? If you want to have a security team and all that stuff, it's hard to do that. And one way that's good, yeah, having these things be accessible to everybody. They also learn stuff like, oh, this is why security is important. This is what all the security people are always talking about. They're like, this is the stuff, okay, that makes sense. I kind of get that. I don't know, that's what I think. Okay, part 3. Did you really believe it before when I said, and then somehow we steal the production database? Come on, I kind of totally skipped over that. I bet you're all wondering, like, okay, but how do you actually do that? I bet you're all wondering, how do you actually do that? How do you actually steal the production database? Because I skipped over it before. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alex. We really appreciate that. We do have time for a couple of questions. Anyone have some specific questions? I'm sure there's some things you can't answer. But, okay, yes, up there. If you can call it out, I'll repeat it so that we get it on the tape.
You mentioned macOS, and you just glossed over the like, antivirus part. I'm just wondering, is macOS is pretty strong, like, when you open the app, it verifies the signature of the app, and it locks it, and you system preferences and bypass it. How do you bypass that?
So just for the recording, macOS is super tough to do stuff in. How do you get around it?
Yeah, can we hear me? Yeah. That specific thing with, if you make a macOS app, it has to be signed, and there's like Gatekeeper, which wants you to only have like a macOS developer certificate, which you need like a credit card to do and stuff, and it's really annoying to do. some people just don't have apps as their delivery method because of that. They use like something else. They ask the person to like run this bash script or whatever. But if you do use an app, I think the common way people do that for malware is they do what real software does, which is they just include instructions being like, hey, when you open this app, now your computer's going to tell you to go to security preferences. Here's how you do that. Click here, then click here, and click there. And people just do it because that's the state-of-the-art way to install software on macOS right now.
We have one more time for one more question. Anybody got something? No? Oh, yes, okay, one here.
So if you worked at a large organization which hypothetically employed about 15,000 people, it's pretty likely that someone's going to fall for a phishing link. So it seems like a waste of time to have to like phish people every time that you want to set up an operation. Is there something you could perhaps do about that?
I can't really imagine what it would be like to work at somewhere of that scale, but I guess if I were to sort of get creative, if you were to get like bored of phishing people, or if you were to like realize that phishing people takes a long time, like it takes months to like do all the phishing and all that, and doesn't always work, then you could just ask somebody who works there, being like, hey, would you like to volunteer to get phished? So where like you don't actually phish them, but you say, at this date and time, I will send you this link, which you will then click on, or will send you this code to then download and run on your laptop. And then later, when the incident response people ask you about it, here's a script for you to follow, or alternatively, there's no script, just tell them it was me, or whatever it is. You can arrange that sort of assume compromise type thing if you want to skip the phishing phase because it's been done enough before, and you're like, do we really need to test if we can get phished? Maybe you don't need to test it anymore. Is what I would guess, but I don't know.
Thank you so much. Another round of applause for Alex. Thank you.